Justin, 1, 2. Justin, coming through. Hearing me loud and clear. Justin, 1, 2. 1, 2. Justin. Justin, Mike. Justin. Justin.
It's 9:00. We will call this meeting of the Texas Pharmacy Board to order. As is our tradition, I will read our mission statement. That is that the Texas State Board of Pharmacy, as a leader in protecting the public health of the citizens of Texas, shall uphold quality standards for licensing and facilitate regulation that promotes innovative, multidisciplinary, and collaborative practices and education which produces quality care and positive patient outcomes. As far as the meeting goes, the restrooms are out this way. There are QR codes for the Wi-Fi. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, the agenda. I wanted to recognize Jim Lovering is in our audience, a 50-year licensee. Congratulations and welcome to the board. And with that, I'll turn it over to Danny for roll call.
Thank you. Good morning. Donna Montemayor. Donnie Lewis. Rick Fernandez. Haysha Freeman. Stacy Hightower. Randy Martin. Ian Shaw. Suzette Tijerina. Rick Tisch. And Jenny Yoakum. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. We do have a quorum. As far as continuing education, the board will grant 3 hours of CE, which can be counted as the Texas-specific pharmacy law or general credit. As usual, you will need to be in attendance for the entire meeting to receive CE, and the QR code will be posted at the exits when we get ready to leave. With that, we will get into the agenda. The first thing, board members, is looking at the minutes. You each received a copy of the minutes of our training session that was held on November 3rd, as well as our last board meeting of November the 4th. And I will need a motion to approve if there are no changes. Ian has made a motion to approve. Donnie has made a second. All those in favor? Any opposed? All right. Motion carries. And with that, we'll move into the rules for final adoption, and I will turn it over to Mr. Griffith.
Thank you, Madam President. Board members, in the rule PDFs you've been provided, there are bookmarks with links to the lines with edits. Also, for the rules for adoption, you have received copies of the orders and preambles in the OneDrive link that was sent to you. Also, you have them on your computers. The rules for adoption were proposed, some of them were proposed at the November 4th, 2025 board meeting and published in the December 26, 2025 issue of the Texas Register, except for the sterile compounding rules, which were proposed at the June 17, 2025 board meeting and published in the October 3rd, 2025 issue of the Texas Register. The first one we're going to look at is we're going to look at the first two together. The first one is C.1.1.1, amendments to 291.33 operational standards. And these amendments, if adopted, allow for written information reinforcing patient counseling to be provided electronically unless requested in a hard copy format. It also removes the requirement to document the request. So, on 291.33, lines 280 through 284, written information must be in plain language designed for the patient and printed in an easily readable font size comparable to but no smaller than 10-point Times Roman. This information may be provided to the patient in an electronic format, such as by email. And here's the new part, unless the patient or patient's agent requests the information in a hard copy format. It also strikes through and removes the requirement that the pharmacy document the request. The next one, which we're looking at together, is C.1.1.2, amendments to 291.104. This is also operational standards. And here we're looking at lines 194 through 198. And that provides that written information must be in plain language designed for the patient and printed in an easily readable font comparable to but no smaller than 10-point Times Roman. This information may be provided to the patient in an electronic format, such as by email. unless the patient or patient's agent requests the information in a hard copy format. And again, it removes the requirement that the pharmacy documents the request. Regarding both of these rules, we did receive one comment from the Texas Association of Health Plans offering support for both rule amendments. There were no additional comments.
All right. Board members, what is your pleasure on this? Do we have a motion to adopt? Rick Fernandez has made a motion to adopt. Is there a second? I've got Rick Tisch with a second. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, John.
Next, board members, we're going to look at C.1.2.1. Well, we're going to do these two rules together. The first one is amendments to 295.8, continuing education requirements. And what these two rules, what these amendments would do is implements Senate Bill 912, which requires a CE tracking system, and clarifies that record retention requirements apply to all CE. And this has to be adopted with an effective date of September 1st, 2026. So we're going to start lines 53 through 57, talking about the authority. In accordance with Section 559.053 of the Texas Pharmacy Act, all pharmacists shall complete and report 30 contact hours, or 3 CEUs, of approved continuing education. And here's the new part. And any courses required under subsection D1 of this section obtained during the previous license period in order to renew their license to practice pharmacy. Jumping down to lines 92 through 93, methods for obtaining continuing education contact hours. A pharmacist may satisfy the continuing education contact hour requirement and list the requirements there. Jumping to lines 99 through 103. Taken in passing the standardized pharmacy examination, the NAPLEX, during the preceding license period as a Texas licensed pharmacist, which shall be equivalent to the number of continuing education hours necessary to renew a license as specified in subsection A1 of this section. And this adds, this paragraph does not apply to the standardized pharmacy examination, or NAPLEX, that an individual uses to obtain initial licensure as a pharmacist. Talking about reporting requirements, lines 105 through 110, renewal of a pharmacist license. To renew a license to practice pharmacy, a pharmacist shall report on the renewal application completion of at least 30 contact hours, or 3 CEUs, of continuing education. It adds that any specialty requirements applicable to the pharmacist, example being preceptor, sterile compounding, immunization, drug therapy management, and any courses required under this paragraph. Next, we're going to jump down to line 124. The license of a pharmacist who fails to report completion of the required number of continuing education contact hours or any courses required under this paragraph shall not be renewed, and the pharmacist shall not be issued a renewal certificate for the license period until such time as the pharmacist successfully completes the required continuing education and reports the completion to the board. Jumping down to lines 158 through 161, exemptions from reporting requirements. All pharmacists licensed in Texas shall be exempt from the continuing education requirements in paragraph 1 of this subsection during their initial license period, with the exception of the requirements in paragraph 1B and D, and that strikes through C and F of this subsection, which shall be completed during the time period specified in the paragraphs. And then we're going to jump down to lines 198 through 207. Pharmacists who teach these courses may receive credit toward their continuing education, but such credit may be received only once for teaching the same course during a license period. And what this adds is that the documentation of the course instruction shall be a signed letter from the academic administrator, example being the department head or program director, of the professional degree program or advanced pharmacy degree program that contains the course title and completion date, the name of the pharmacist who taught the course, and a proportion of the course taught by the pharmacist, if the course was co-taught. The pharmacist who co-teaches a course shall receive continuing education credit in proportion to the percentage of the course taught by the pharmacist rounded to the nearest contact hour. Moving down to lines 228 through 242, there are several opportunities for credit that are being removed. The first one being removing credit for attendance at a Texas State Board of Pharmacy meeting. and also removing credit for participation in a Texas State Board of Pharmacy appointed task force. And again, those are being cut. Moving down to lines 250 through 270, a couple more items that are being cut. Pharmacists shall receive credit for the continuing education requirements for programs or courses approved by other state boards of pharmacy. So other state boards of pharmacy courses, those are being removed. Also removing completion of an Institute for Safe Medication Practices, or ISMP, medication safety self-assessment. Moving down to lines 291 through 294, retention of continuing education records and audits of records by the board. Retention of records. Pharmacists are required to maintain certificates of completion of approved continuing education for 3 years from the date of the reporting the contact hours or course completion on a license renewal application. Such records may be maintained in hard copy or electronic format. Jumping to lines 295 through 298, audit of records by the board. The board shall use the continuing education tracking system described in subsection G of this section to audit the records of pharmacists for verification of reported continuing education contact hours or course completion. Lines 299 through 303. Upon written request, a pharmacist shall provide to the board documentation of proof for all continuing education contact hours and course completions reported during a specified license period. And we're going to jump down to the end, lines 312 through 318, subsection G, continuing education tracking system. As specified in section 112.103 of the Texas Occupations Code, proof of completion of all continuing education requirements shall be reported to the board through the board's continuing education tracking system. A pharmacist shall not be issued a renewal certificate for the license period unless the pharmacist has reported the completion of all required contact hours and any courses required under subsection D1 of this section through the continuing education tracking system. And there were no comments received regarding this rule. Moving to the next one, though, as we'll take these together, is C.1.2.2, amendments to 297.8. Again, this is continuing education requirements. And once again, this is implementing Senate Bill 912, which requires a CE tracking system and clarifies records retention requirements apply to all CE. Also, this must be adopted with an effective date of September 1st, 2026. This is for the technicians. On lines 57 through 62, provides that all pharmacy technicians shall complete and report 20 contact hours of approved continuing education and any courses required under subsection B4 of this section obtained during the previous renewal period in order to renew their registration as a pharmacy technician. No more than 5 of the 20 contact hours may be earned at the pharmacy technician's workplace through in-service education and training under the direct supervision of the pharmacist or pharmacists. Lines 72 through 75 provide that to renew a registration, a pharmacy technician shall report on the renewal application completion of at least 20 contact hours of continuing education and any courses required under this paragraph. Lines 83 through 87 provide that pharmacy technicians are required to maintain records of completion of approved continuing education for 3 years from the date of reporting the contact hours or course completion on a renewal application. The record shall contain at least the following information: the name of the participant, the title and date of the program, program sponsor or provider, number of hours awarded, and dated signature of sponsor representative. Lines 92 through 95 provides that the board shall use the continuing education tracking system described in subsection C of this section to audit the records of pharmacy technicians for verification of reported continuing education, contact hours, or course completion. Jumping down to lines 164 through 173. Pharmacy technicians who teach these courses may receive credit toward their continuing education, but such credit may be received only once for teaching the same course during a license period. The new part here is that documentation of the course instruction shall be a signed letter from the academic administrator, examples being department head or program director, of the training program or professional degree program that contains the course title and completion date, the name of the pharmacy technician who taught the course, and the proportion of the course taught by the pharmacy technician if the course was co-taught. A pharmacy technician who teaches a course shall receive continuing education credit in proportion to the percentage of the course taught by the pharmacy technician, rounded to the nearest contact hour. And some opportunities for credit that are being cut. If you look at lines 194 through 208, we are removing that attendance at a Texas State Board of Pharmacy meeting, and also removing receiving credit for being on a Texas State Board of Pharmacy appointed task force. Both those things are being cut. Jumping down to lines 216 through 236, we're also removing that pharmacy technicians shall receive credit for the continuing education requirements for programs approved by other state boards of pharmacy. Also removing credit for completion of an Institute for Safe Medication Practices, or ISMP, medication safety self-assessment. Finally, jumping down to lines 262 through 268, subsection C, continuing education tracking system. As specified in section 112.103 of the Texas Occupations Code, proof of completion of all continuing education requirements shall be reported to the board through the board's continuing education tracking system. Pharmacy technician shall not be issued a renewal certificate for the license period unless the pharmacy technician has reported the completion of all required contact hours and any courses required under subsection B4 of this section through the continuing education tracking system. And once again, no comments were received regarding this rule either.
Thank you, John. All right, board members, what is your pleasure on this?
I just have a question with regards to the system that we need. Have we made any progress on finding a vendor or started that process at all?
We're still in the process of that. So we're working on getting out either a request for proposal or a request for qualifications.
Thank you.
Mr. Tisch, you had your hand up? We have a motion from Rick Tisch to adopt. Do we have a second? We have a second from Ian Shaw. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, John. Iman, I believe you're going to take us through C.1.3.
Good morning. Agenda item C.1.3 concerns amendments to 291-133. These amendments were proposed by the board at the June 17th, 2025 board meeting and published in the October 3rd, 2025 issue of the Texas Register. After considering oral and written public comments at the June board meeting, the board reproposed the majority of the amendments as written and made targeted changes to certain parts of the rule. For each subsection, I'm going to do a high-level overview of the proposed amendments, followed by a summary of the specific changes that were made by the board in June. Starting on line 175 is subsection A, which describes the purpose of the rule. No amendments were proposed to this subsection. Next, on line 188 is subsection B, concerning definitions. The board added or amended the definition of various terms, including anteroom, beyond use date, buffer room, cleaning agent, clean room suite, component, immediate use, master formulation record, restricted access barrier system, and segregated compounding area. The amendments previously added a definition for the term designated person, but the board removed that definition at the June meeting due to its lack of usage in the body of the rule. Moving to line 424, subsection C of the rule concerns personnel requirements. The board replaced risk level language with category language, amended the requirements for aseptic technique evaluation, media fill testing, hand hygiene, and garbing, and updated the requirements for surface sampling. At the June board meeting, the board specified that media fill testing needs to be conducted under the most challenging or stressful conditions and standardized the media fill testing requirements across all three categories. Moving to line 771, we are in subsection D concerning operational standards. The board replaced risk level language with category-based standards, specified requirements for dry heat depyrogenation, exempted preparations for direct and immediate administration from the category requirements, provided updated requirements for single-dose and multiple-dose containers, and clarified when docking proprietary bag and vial systems is considered compounding, and specified air exchange requirements for the different classified areas. Additionally, the board made 7 changes to the operational standards at the June board meeting. First, on line 782, for the maximum batch size, the maximum number of final yield units was changed from 750 to 250, and an exception was added to allow the maximum batch size to be 1,000 final yield units for preparations fully packaged using an automated compounding device. Second, on line 1057, the board specified in the absence of supporting documentation or data in a USPF NF monograph, manufacturer's data, or previously conducted or contracted for testing, compounding personnel may rely on antimicrobial effectiveness testing conducted or contracted in the particular container closure system in which it will be packaged. The board removed language that limited the exception to one for each formulation in the particular container closure system. Similarly, the board removed the language that limited container closure integrity testing to once per formulation and fill volume. Third, on lines 1132 and 1572, in the temperature requirements, the board added an exception that allows a clean room or compounding aseptic containment isolator used for compounding radiopharmaceuticals to be maintained at 25 degrees Celsius or cooler rather than 20 degrees or cooler, and added a general exception that permits excursions in temperature or humidity of no more than 10% and lasting no longer than 30 minutes. Fourth, on lines 1162 and 1480, the board removed outdated and inconsistent language concerning the delineation of a buffer room that is not physically separated from an anteroom. Fifth, on line 1406, the board specified that a Category 2 preparation in a non-aqueous dosage form may have a beyond use date of not more than 90 days if based on documented current literature supporting stability and sterility. Sixth, on line 1422, the board created an exception to the beyond use date requirements for Category 3 preparations that provides, with published data supporting stability, aseptically processed or terminally sterilized preparations in batch sizes of less than 24 final yield units without sterility and endotoxin testing may have a beyond use date of not more than 60 days at controlled room temperature, 90 days in a refrigerator, or 120 days in a freezer, limited to one such batch per day. Seventh, on line 1695, the board specified that in addition to USP-NF drugs used in sterile compounding may be of a British pharmacopoeia, European pharmacopoeia, or Japanese pharmacopoeia grade substance. Moving to line 2127, we are now in subsection E, records. In this subsection, the amendments specify the requirements for two key compounding records, the master formulation record and the compounding record. The board proposed two additional changes to subsection E at the June board meeting. On line 2179, the board added assay, loss on drying, and water content to the examples of the relevant characteristics of components that need to be recorded in the master formulation record. On line 2186, the board specified that the physical description of the final preparation needed to include the desired pH of aqueous preparations for buffered eye drops and non-sterile to sterile compounding. No changes were made to subsection F, so we are moving to line 2344 concerning the final subsection G, recall procedures. The amendments specify that in the event of a recall, the pharmacist in charge is responsible for determining the distribution of any affected products, ensure that any unused dispensed preparations are recalled, and any stock remaining in the pharmacy is quarantined, and ensure that SOPs for the recall of out-of-specification dispensed preparations shall contain procedures to investigate and document the reason for failure. The board did not make any additional changes to this subsection at the June board meeting. The board received 7 public comments on the proposed amendments. The board received comments from the Alliance for Pharmacy Compounding, expressing concern that there may be a conflict between the Beyond Use Date section and the sterility testing section concerning the testing required for batches of less than 24 units, and suggesting the board require sterility and endotoxin testing for all Category 3 preparations regardless of batch size, or, if the board retains the exception for batches of less than 24 units, limit beyond use dates for untested aqueous preparations to USB-consistent durations as described in Category 2. The commenter also incorporated by reference its previous comments expressing support for some of the amendments, suggesting adoption of USB standards for sterility testing of batches of up to 250 units, revisions to certain definitions and the component selection requirements, clarification of the beyond use date documentation required for a non-aqueous Category 3 preparation and the gloving procedures, removal of outdated references to a buffer room not separated from an anteroom, requiring sterile one-step disinfectants and filter integrity testing on each filter if multiple filters are required, and allowing pharmacies to determine their maximum batch size and beyond use dates and make copies of commercially available drugs that are not reasonably available, and expressing concern about the lack of a requirement for pharmacies that compound Category 3 preparations to perform media fill testing conducted under the most challenging or stressful conditions. The board received comments from Brad Jordan with Eli Lilly, supporting some of the amendments, expressing concern that certain amendments may conflict with federal law, and suggesting removal of language allowing batch sizes of up to 1,000 units when using automated systems, removal of language allowing bulk drug products identified in British, European, or Japanese pharmacopoeias, or allowing drug components from unregistered API manufacturers, and amending the definition of not commercially available to mirror the federal shortage list, and avoiding departures from the USB general chapters. The board received comments from Deeb Aid with Empower Pharmacy, suggesting the board send the rule back to the Compounding Rules Advisory Group Sterile Subcommittee for further evaluation of the proposed changes, expressing concern that limits on batch sizes or beyond use dates may introduce more risk of contamination from increased human activity, recommending removal of limits on maximum batch sizes, or alternatively, specifying that the limits only apply to manual compounding, and allowing all Category 3 preparations to have a beyond use date of up to 365 days when validated by stability, sterility, and other appropriate testing and stored under appropriate conditions. The board received comments from Stephen Snow with Bendon, Sumrall, and Ladner, expressing concern that the estimated costs are stated as unit costs, i.e. per formulation, rather than as annualized total costs based on the volume and practices of an average pharmacy, providing an alternative estimate of costs based on the number of annual units estimated by 4 surveyed pharmacies, and asserting the amendments will result in higher costs that may cause independent pharmacies to go out of business or pass on costs to patients. The board received comments from Jasper Lavoie with the Woodlands Compounding Pharmacy, supporting the beyond use date exception for batch sizes less than 24 final yield units, expressing concern that the estimated cost of preliminary testing requirements do not account for the number of formulations that will have to be tested, the increased cost of antimicrobial effectiveness testing for multiple dosed preparations, and the beyond use dating requirements do not allow pharmacists to use specific documentation or literature, and suggesting removal of the exception for radiopharmaceuticals to the temperature requirements for the clean room and compounding aseptic containment isolator, and combining beyond use dating for aseptically processed and terminally sterilized Category 3 preparations using the dating for terminal sterilization. The board received comments from Jim Hernser with Las Colinas Pharmacy, Compounding and Wellness, expressing concern that the amendments will reduce patient access to compounded medications by increasing compliance costs, recommending that the clean room temperature requirements be suggestive instead of mandatory, and allow excursions in temperature or humidity of 26 degrees Celsius and 70% humidity lasting no longer than 24 hours, and suggesting the term terminal sterilization include 0.22 micron membrane filtration coupled with bubble testing and analytical lab sterilization, and be subject to the Category 3 beyond use dating as autoclave sterilization. The board received comments from John Daniel, suggesting revisions to the definitions of hazardous drugs and reasonable quantity, recommending that sterile sampling media devices includes validated in-house sterile media preparations, gloved fingertip and thumb requalification after a failed test require 3 consecutive successful tests, and primary engineering controls for Category 2 or 3 preparations may not be placed in a segregated compounding area, and requesting clarification of when alternative stability data may extend beyond may extend beyond use dates and the minimum retention period for environmental and sterility records. On October 26, 2025, the board submitted the proposed amendments to the Office of the Governor Regulatory Compliance Division for review. On January 26, 2026, the division issued a determination letter that found the proposed amendments are a reasonable exercise of the board's authority to protect public health, safety, and welfare by ensuring that pharmacies engaged in sterile compounding operate in a safe and sanitary environment. The division determined that the proposed amendments are consistent with state policy and approved the amendments for final adoption and implementation. And I will now turn it back over to President Spear.
Thank you, E.1. We do have 5 individuals that have asked to speak. We're going to go ahead and call them up one at a time. I will ask that you pay attention to each other's comments and don't duplicate. We will have 3 minutes per. And our first speaker will be Stephen Snow from Bendon, Summerall, and Ladner, LLC.
Thank you all. I appreciate the opportunity to address the members of the board. I want to begin by, again, thanking the board for the time and effort I know has gone into working on these rule changes. It's been a long and arduous process for the members of the board and your staff, and we truly appreciate the time and attention you've given to it. I'd like to direct my remarks this morning to the economic impact statement that was provided with the current version of these proposed rules. And specifically, as was noted earlier, the concern that the clients that I have who are small and mid-sized sterile compounding pharmacies have with what these costs truly look like in the aggregate. When you take a look at what these costs will mean when you apply these unit costs, which on their face seem fairly small, what pharmacy can't handle a few $100s to a few $1,000s per test. But when you consider the fact that compounding pharmacies exist because of their ability to make unique formulations, that they're in the business to make one-offs and a variety of formulations. What this results in is every pharmacy, for the most part, having at least 100 compounded formulations, more often than not, upwards pushing 200 or more. And so if we take these costs that are provided in unit form in the economic impact statement and we spread those across the true nature of these pharmacies, we have to necessarily multiply these figures by 100 or 200 to get a true insight into what these costs would look like. And it was hard to tell from the economic impact statement whether that analysis has actually been performed at this point. So what we did is we went and we polled 4 small and mid-sized pharmacies and asked them, what do your numbers look like? If we applied the board's estimated low and high estimates for each one of these categories, and we applied that across your formulations, what would those costs look like to you? And what I provided in our written materials, exhibits A, B, C, and D are the individual costs that we've calculated based upon those 4 sample pharmacies. Exhibit D, I'm not sure if you have it in front of you, but I'd like to just touch on it very briefly. This is an average of those 4, and if we apply the low and high unit costs provided by the board and apply those to their 100 or 200 formulations, what those costs would look like. Just in looking at the preliminary testing, applying the board's low and high figures, the low end of your estimates, if we only apply those to 100 formulations, it results in $354,000 costs for one pharmacy only doing 100 formulations. If we take the board's high estimate and then apply that to a pharmacy that has 200 formulations, that number increases to $1.26 million just for that preliminary testing that's being required. And that's what's shown there on the top of the page under Chart A. If we go to Chart B, those take into consideration the variable costs that these pharmacies will undertake over the course of the first year, based upon their volume of business and how many different batches they do and so forth. So here in Exhibit E, Chart B, this is the average of these 4 pharmacies. Going through these variable costs, we're looking at, from the low cost estimate of the board, $432,000 additional dollars that we required to be paid by a pharmacy, up to $924,000 additional costs. If we look down at Chart C, then we've combined those preliminary testing figures with the variable costs. The first year alone, on the low side estimate for only 100 formulations, we're looking at $786,000. The high estimate at a 200 formulation pharmacy at almost $2.2 million for the first year alone to comply with these regulations. If we expound that across the first 5 years from the moment this rule goes into effect, the next 5 years, we're looking on a low end $2.5 million for that low estimate 100 formulation pharmacy, up to $5.8 million or 5 years for the high estimate on a 200 formulation pharmacy. Those are not de minimis figures for a pharmacy. I don't know if any of the pharmacies that you may be affiliated with can handle those kind of costs and stay in business, but it's going to be very difficult to do that. We're going to see pharmacies that are going out of business, passing those costs on to their cash-paying customers, or being bought out by larger conglomerate pharmacy systems to be able to absorb those costs. And I'd like to conclude my remarks by just pointing out those figures are for a single pharmacy. As indicated in the economic impact statement, there are 891 sterile compounding pharmacies licensed in the state of Texas. If we take these same figures and we spread those across all 891 pharmacies, over the next 5 years, we're looking at $2.2 billion impact on the low end, $5.2 billion impact on the high end. Those are not de minimis figures. Those are significant figures. And I would ask the board, if the board has not aggregated the figures in its analysis, please take the time to poll Texas licensed sterile compounding pharmacies to figure out what their numbers are on a larger scale and get a more clear vision of what the true economic impact will be over the next 5 years, because it's going to be significant. And if the board makes just one change to these rules to try to adjust for the cost, it would be in allowing pharmacies to share data or rely upon published data for their preliminary testing, their expanded microbial and container closure testing for BUDs, If they're unable to share data or rely upon published data rather than every single one of those 891 pharmacies having to redo the same tests over and over again that somebody else has just done, it will reduce the cost dramatically. Thank you.
Thank you. Next will be Jim Hersner from Las Colinas Pharmacy.
Okay, Julie, I chunked my 8-minute speech.
3 minutes, Jim.
Even though I gave 2 weeks or 2 months of my life for these regulations in the task force. Okay, that's all right. Hey, I did want to brag a little bit because I just got confirmation yesterday that HHS Secretary Kennedy has finalized my vetting, and I am now an official candidate for the Pharmacy Compound Advisory Committee. And it just goes to show that my commitment to compounding is as strong as anyone's. And I've been compounding since 1984. And my main goal is to help patients. You know, it's a nice livelihood. I love doing it. But helping patients and seeing patients' lives change because of compounding when traditional medicine has no answers for them, it's amazing. And so when I make comments, it's about me being able to continue to take care of these folks, because it's not fair that compounds can only be available to the wealthiest of Texans. And if we pass some of these regulations, that's what's going to happen, is it's going to be only available to the wealthiest of Texans. And I'm not sure that that's what this is all about. Most of the things that are left to talk about seem to be with the 503A community compounding pharmacy regulations, and they just need a little tweaking to allow us to continue to provide the care they want to provide. Number one, on the batch size, I'm just hoping that we'll eliminate the fully packaged online 785 and just change it to packaged. And that'll reduce a lot of, or make a lot of clarity happen, and the inspectors will have an easier time. Number 1131, line 1131, I might ask you on this humidity and drifts and temperature, what do hospitals do? Well, hospitals don't shut down when they have a drift. They have SOPs. SOPs then say, let's do a risk analysis. When we do a risk analysis, we make decisions and we make an action plan, and we look at patient health, safety, and we go forward. Well, why would we not do the same thing in our pharmacy? If we do a risk analysis, so I'm just saying 30 minutes is not enough time for me to call in an HVAC to get into the pharmacy. Let us do a risk analysis and then decide if the patients are at danger. On line 1418, terminal sterilization, you might ask, what do pharmaceutical manufacturers do? Well, all of them do terminal sterilization using, and it's the wrong term, but they use membrane filtration, 0.2 micron membrane filtration. They then test the integrity of the filter. They test the final solution for sterility and endotoxins, and they manufacture. And if you look at a hospital, almost every solution and every single fluid in a hospital is sterilized using membrane filtration. The technology has gone to the stars. We're not in the 1990s anymore. We have great technology here. And so shouldn't we be able to use that same technology to equal or exceed terminal sterilization for an autoclave, which is going to break down most of the drugs that we use? It's not applicable to our practice, and it's not applicable for our patients. Membrane filtration is. We're using it every day. Allow us to have the longer dating associated with the autoclave sterilization. I'd love to talk about 30 more minutes because I'm so passionate about this. Matter of fact, I think I got a little reputation in the task force. And so please excuse me because I do have passion for my patients and for this wonderful job that I get to do. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim. Next,
That's brief for me.
That was brief. I'm very proud of you. I'll go on the record for saying I'm super proud of you on that. Next is Jonathan Head from the Alliance of Pharmacy Compounders.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
As Julie said, my name's Jonathan Head. I'm a compounding pharmacist and co-owner of Las Colinas Pharmacy in Irving, Texas. I also serve on the board of directors for the Alliance of Pharmacy Compounding. I appreciate the board's time and opportunity to continue this conversation today. I want to focus on just two items and the proposed rules, and I'll be brief as well. My first concern relates to the beyond use stating for Category 3 aqueous preparations, and I have two concerns that I'd like to discuss. First, in the proposed rules, extended dating is effectively reserved only for autoclave products, as Jim mentioned, even though most aqueous preparations cannot tolerate heat and are produced using membrane filtration followed by aseptic filling, supported by safety controls, sterility, endotoxin testing, and membrane integrity testing. This process is widely recognized as a gold standard in FDA-regulated pharmaceutical manufacturing for heat-sensitive aqueous products. And as Jim mentioned, most of the things that we're dispensing in the pharmacies as well as in hospitals are membrane filtered, not autoclaved. Patient safety is not compromised with these medications, yet the proposed rule effectively penalizes this pathway of sterilization, limiting extended dating to heat-based methods, unnecessarily restricts compounding for medications that cannot be safely or ethically produced using heat. And secondly, as it relates to the BUDs for Category 3 aqueous preparations, the proposed rules don't have any mechanism to consider validated stability and sterility data to support a longer BUD, even if robust formulation-specific testing exists. In these cases, science and formulation-specific data should guide the decisions. If pharmacies have testing and data validating a 180-day BUD, that should be counted over an arbitrary dating table. My request is straightforward. Texas should explicitly recognize membrane filtration as an acceptable supported sterilization pathway for the extended dating and allow evidence-based BUD extensions supported by validated formulation-specific data. Doing so preserves patient safety and access without increasing risk or costs. My second concern, which I brought to the board before, is around the 5% sterility testing requirements for Category 3 preparations. Under current USP 797, sterility tests are capped at 20 vials based on USP 71. Under the proposed rule, the 5% requirement adds unnecessary cost and waste without documented safety advantage. So I respectfully propose that Texas adopts a testing cap of 20 vials per batch, similar to what's found in USP 71. This approach maintains a high level of safety and remains consistent with industry standards. And lastly, I'm really seeking clarification on 2 points related to batch size. If y'all could enlighten me on this and make sure that I'm understanding the rules correctly. The first one is about the allowance for 1,000 vial batch sizes when a preparation is fully packaged using an automated compounding device. At the October board meeting, the discussion among the board, and I thought the apparent intent suggested that automation, such as a repeater pump, would qualify under this provision. And if that is the board's intent, I respectfully urge that the language be clarified to prevent any misinterpretations and inconsistent enforcement during inspections that may only look for fully automated like robots, just to clarify that. Secondly, about the batch yield. So specifically, if whether the 250 or 1,000 batch size cap applies to the total number of vials that are produced, including those that will be sent in for testing, or is it the number of vials that are intended for patient dispensing and excluding what is being sent for testing? So if we have a batch size of 250 and we have to send 20 of those in for testing, the batch size effectively would be 230. So just clarification on that. So thank you for your time and your service to our profession and your consideration for the concerns that are raised here today.
Thank you. The next is Frank Kartoffel from Empower Pharmacy.
How are you all today? As everyone, I'm Frank Cradfield, the Director of Pharmacy Operations at Empower Pharmacy, a compounding pharmacy in Houston, Texas. First off, as always, thank you so much for letting us speak with you today. As it was stated earlier, it's been a lot of conversations leading forward this. So our comments are regarding two primary topics, and that would be around batch size and beyond use date. We submitted a very lengthy comment in October, but I'll kind of just stick to the highlights. First, regarding the operational standards, our comments regarding batch size requirements, specifically around automation. The batch size requirements in 797 were focused on manual filling. In the FAQs of the USP, it addresses the rationale behind a maximum batch size, stating sterile compounding within 503A facilities is largely a manual process, and the risk of contamination in a CSP is likely to increase with batch size, especially for manual process. Additionally, it stated smaller batches reduce the potential for operator fatigue. Limiting batch size in the manual fills is I can understand if the board is progressing with that, but basing it on fatigue does not apply to automation. Personnel represents the primary source of contamination in an ISO classified area, and having them enter more often goes against the FDA guidance for industry sterile drug product produced by aseptic processing current drug manufacturing practice. That's a heck of a title for a document, which emphasizes minimal presence of personnel and activity in critical areas. Also, numerical limits such as 250 or 1,000 are currently supported by empirical evidence. USP's original rationale was driven by sterility testing under USP 71, not proof that batch size itself improves safety, but appropriate sampling. As was mentioned earlier, batch sizes over 500 would require 20 units or 2%, whichever is greater, to be tested. So 2% of 1,000 or 2% of 50,000 would still determine if there is an issue. So our recommendation is automated compound devices and technology have evolved and created safe and effective ways to compound. We asked to not put a numerical limit like 1,000, which is not currently science or evidence-based on automation, asked to focus on number or percent of samples tested. Our second comment is regarding storage requirements in the BUD. We fully support the board's commitment to patient safety and evidence-based regulation. Our concerns that the proposed limit on BED for Category 3 CSPs to less than 365 days is not currently supported or by available science or federal guidance. Current rules allow a BED based on professional experience, interpretation, appropriate information sources, and stability documentation and literature. FDA draft guidance for 503B outsourcing facilities, as well as USP and ICH, all recognize that long-term real-time stability can justify assigning BUDs up to 1 year when confirms that the product remains sterile, potent, and chemically stable. 797 could put blanket BUDs like 60 days for manufacturing on non-refrigerated, 90 for refrigerated, and 120 for frozen across the board. These shorter limits could shorten access to medications due to shorter availability, production and delivery windows, reduce medication available for hospitals, clinics, and patients statewide, and create inconsistencies with national standards and other jurisdictions. Our recommendation, instead of a blanket BUD applied across all medications, we ask you focus on sterility and stability testing to create BEDs which align with FDA and USPA risk framework. I really appreciate your time, and we are open to work with the board to design a framework that promotes innovation and safety. Thank you for your time.
Our last speaker is Leah Cody from the Texas Society of Health System Pharmacies.
Hi, it's Suzanne Henry speaking on behalf of Leah, who couldn't be here today. First of all, TSHP, Texas Society of Health System Pharmacies, would like to thank the board for taking in all the stakeholder input and considering these national standards from the stakeholders' viewpoint. We support the overall intent of the proposed rules and acknowledge the progress that we've made. But we do remain concerned about specific deviations from the national standards, from the national USP 797 guidelines, particularly those related to batch volume size. So, for example, the term automated compounding device is not clearly defined, which may result in unintended use of large batch sizes, thereby increasing the potential risk to patients across a much larger scale than previously allowed. Automation is not a justification for exposing Texas to these increased risk. Health system pharmacies operate in an environment that is increasingly national in scope. Many systems must comply not only with state regulations, but also with accreditation standards, multi-state operational policies, internal risk management frameworks that are explicitly aligned with USP standards. When state rules diverge from national guidance without strong supporting evidence, it creates uncertainty and operational challenges for health systems that are striving to maintain consistent, nationally recognized best practices. Most importantly, any deviation from established national standards must be carefully evaluated throughout the lens of patient safety. Sterile compounding carries inherent risks, and even small changes in practice, such as batch size, can have downstream implications for sterility assurance, error detection, and patient outcomes. TSHP remains committed to being a constructive partner to the board. We will continue to advocate for regulations that are evidence-based, nationally aligned, and centered on patient safety. As practices evolve and new data emerges, we welcome continued dialogue and future opportunities to further refine Texas sterile compounding rules in a way that fully aligns with USP 797 and supports the safe delivery of care to patients across our state. Thank you again for your leadership, your service, and for considering our perspective.
Thanks, Suzanne. All right, that concludes our public comment. Board members, what is your pleasure at this point? Would you like to take a quick break? Just a quick break. How about if we come back at 10:15? Is that good for you? All right. We will show this meeting adjourned until 10:15. And call the meeting back to order. On the agenda, we're still on C.1.3. And I believe that Megan had a point that she wanted to bring up before we started discussion. So I'll turn it to Megan.
Thank you. Yes. In reviewing the comment from Eli Lilly, we looked at the federal law, and we do believe on line 1694 through 1699. Get that pulled up as well. Where you've added in British pharmacopoeia, European pharmacopoeia, and Japanese pharmacopoeia, it does appear like that would conflict with the federal law. So I would recommend going ahead and taking those out and taking it back to USP or National Formulary so that we don't have an unintended conflict there.
All right. And with that, I will open it up for discussion.
Madam President, so I had a couple of comments and then that I just kind of wanted to throw out there. So we've been working on the rules since 2023. So when the USP released their new 797 standards of practice, we got a task force of experts that, even though, we've had comment from one of the task force members here today, we've had comments from other task force members in the past. While I think it's fair to say that them as individuals are not necessarily happy with everything that's in here or agree with everything that's in here, I do think that they did provide us a very effective consensus recommendation from that group of 6 experts that we recruited. There were areas they didn't agree. We debated those pretty rigorously here and carefully weighed the benefits to public and patient safety and against the potential risks of access to care and other things that have been discussed here as well. We integrated public comment, got scores of public comment, and integrated that where possible and where practical as it benefited the public safety. We have had some great testimony here today. I do think that there's some inaccuracies in some of the things that were stated and that are in some of the exhibits, but save that for a different day. So with the modification that was mentioned, I would actually propose to adopt.
Okay.
That's a motion.
We have a motion, and I know Ian's raising his hand. I do want to, and I know this is a little out of Robert's rules, but I know that Jenny had some comments that she wanted to make. So I just want to make sure that everybody is heard.
Yeah, I just had a few semantic things, a little and word here and an or there that I picked up from the comments to tweak a little bit of. I don't know if that's enough to send it back.
That would not be substantial.
Yeah.
I mean, Megan would have to make the final call on that, but
It would depend on what the tweaks are.
Okay, you want to look? But I don't want to hold up Randy's, get out of the order of the Robert's Rules of Order. So you made a proposal
to
to adopt
with Megan's
suggested changes. Okay.
changes.
Okay.
So are you making a second?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Okay. If we look at line 294, and this comes from someone's comments, the word "and" belongs between microbial and particulate at the end of 294 and into 295. Risk of microbial and particulate.
Use your microphone.
Risk of I can't see it. Risk of microbial and particulate contamination.
Okay.
Is everybody okay with that? With regards to some of the comments today on the fully automated aspect of the batch size, if we, at the end of that sentence, just put like example repeater pump, would that be a problem, Megan? at the
Do you
end
happen to know
of
what line you're looking at?
785.
And we just add, for example,
For
repeater
example,
pump.
repeater pump.
I don't think that'd be an issue.
Okay.
My only concern there is that it could be construed as exclusively repeater pump, and there's, yeah, it can be part of the process, but it's not the exclusive process.
So I think that would be the difference between, for example, and meaning. So like
Yeah.
EGIE.
Mhm.
So
Thank you.
if it says, for example, hopefully nobody misconstrues that.
And what about omitting the word fully?
That would be, I mean, Megan,
That one seems a little bit leaning towards substantive.
yeah, use your microphone.
If we go back to 750, an attempt, or actually 751, an attempt shall be made. Attempt, can we define attempt? I'd like to know more definition on the word
What
attempt.
is-
I attempted to do it, but
What is that? What are you trying to accomplish by giving the definition of attempt? What is your fear that
shall
if we
be
don't?
made to identify any microorganisms recovered. So you're attempting to, or you're not attempting to?
So that comes down to the rationale behind that. That's language out of 797 as well, I believe.
Okay.
And the rationale is that sometimes the species cannot be recovered down to the genus level because of the different types of testing that they may use. So sometimes you damage depending on how much microbial sample you have, they may not be able to get down to the genus level just because of the technology. So.
Okay, that we did that. And that's fixed. I guess the next issue would be the temperature humidity. It starts on 1131. And I know we discussed this in the June meeting, and we came up, Randy, because I had suggested, we use the word mean, and then you came up with other recommendations, and then we threw in the USP 85 part of it for the radiopharmaceuticals, where they are allowed to get up to 25 degrees Celsius, which is 77 degrees Fahrenheit, which I think I know that's straight from USP, correct?
It's out of a different chapter. It's out of USP 25. And
25.
the reason is because with the radioactivity present, you can't get down to that temperature.
Mm-hmm.
That's the reason for the variance is because of the hot lab component.
So is it USP 825 that's saying 30 minutes as an excursion, or is that just
No, actually we added that. So the 25 degrees or cooler is out of USP 825. The statement starting with the comma there on line 1133, I think, if I'm lining that up right. It says with excursions and then the remainder of that. That was something that we added based on just feedback we heard some of it today where sometimes there are excursions where we'll go outside and we just need time to correct it, or it's a momentary excursion or something like that. Because at present, like let's say your clean room, just as an example, let's say your clean room's floating around at 65 degrees and maybe you have a moment where your air handler has a hiccup and it bumps up to 70. Technically, the way that the rules are written as of today, we would have to stop operations, or we couldn't give the extended BUD or anything like that. There was no proviso in here for any type of what is a quote unquote momentary excursion. So that's where we came up with that. We kind of basically did an eyeball test of 10% and not longer than 30 minutes, just because that should be more than enough time it wouldn't be enough time to replace an air handler. And I don't think that was the intent of inserting this. It was more of the, you have a hiccup. Do you really have a problem? Is it really truly jeopardizing the environment? And therefore the beyond use dating.
Well, I think the 30 minutes is the kicker. It needs to be longer than 30 minutes because say you have, for example, it happened the other day, a change of air pressure coming in, a weather pattern coming in that's a little more humid. Your HVAC has to work a lot harder to get that humidity under control, and it does it by, either cooling or heating, whichever way it needs to go. And sometimes it might take an hour or two for it to catch up, depending on how many times someone opened the back door or, the other air coming into the building. It's harder to control that and get that temperature back down in a 30-minute time frame. And I just don't want to have any unintended consequences, on someone who's near the coast, with a storm coming and them not be able to get what they need to get out the door because they got up to, 23 degrees C for 45 minutes. You know what I mean? I want to have a little bit of grace there, ease the burden of compliance, as you said.
So I think there's two scenarios that play out, right? So are you pausing operations that are maintenance activities, or are you meeting an urgent need, right? So if it's an urgent need and like that drug's about to be administered, like let's say, so I was lucky enough to have a clean room that was put on an external wall facing the western sun, and they put windows on the stupid thing. And so, yeah, excursions were a reality, right? And we would have to pause operations. Now, if we had an urgent need, you can still function that room under segregated compounding rules, right? You just don't get to put 60 days beyond use date or 9 days beyond use date. It just has to be used within the timeframes of the segregated compounding rules. So you can still compound if you have an urgent need. Whereas if we have a 2-hour window and we decide we want to do an automated batch of over 2,000, and we've had an excursion for 2 hours in that 2-hour window, but maybe we give a 2-hour window here, but that entire 2-hour window, we've compounded 1,000 products, and we're not going to send it for certain types of testing. We've now increased the likelihood of contamination at that because the temperature has been higher, because the fact that the humidity has been variant. And if those things are out of whack with your air handler, you probably also have pressure variance too, right? Because all those things work in sync together. So I think the idea here would be I'd want to be careful with whatever time frame we put in here, because you can compound a lot of things in 2 hours. You can actually compound a lot of things in 30 minutes. And so I'm not married to the time window, but I think we just got to be mindful of what can happen in that time window.
I think the time should change to at least 2 hours. I think that's more realistic.
Would that be?
I disagree.
It's a logical outgrowth. It is getting closer to substantive.
What about an hour?
Probably around the same assessment. It's a logical
Logical outgrowth.
outgrowth, but it is getting closer to substantive.
Meaning it would have to come back.
Yes.
Megan, we can't hear you.
Oh, I was saying it is a logical outgrowth, but it is probably getting closer to substantive than the other changes we have been discussing.
I have a question. Not being from the pharmacy industry, just being consumer rep, I have a question. At what point does the medication start to change or break down or be altered due to temperature change? Like how long is it fully safe, less safe, or you know what I mean? How many minutes until it is altered?
Yeah, it's going to depend upon what is being made, what the ingredients are, and that's where all those beyond use date rules come in.
So part of, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
One of the things that comes into play too, when you're talking 20 degrees Celsius, that's 68 degrees Fahrenheit. 25 degrees Celsius is 77 degrees Fahrenheit. It gets really hot underneath all that garb. So you're talking about sweating, you're talking about just lots of other issues that come into play at 77 degrees. And I don't know if anybody here on this panel has been in an IB room at 77 degrees. It's really hot. It's really, really hot. And you're worried about compounding however many batches, and you're saying you can do that for 2 hours. That sounds like a lot to me.
And
if I see it creep up, I'm probably going to shut it down until I get it figured out.
I will say that you hit it on the head with the sweating. So what happens is there's a couple of things that are in play to answer your question. One is the temperature is actually chosen for comfort of the operator, for them to not perspire, and for them to not shed, which is the reason for the humidity. And so those are in play because the fact Danny pointed out, they're wearing whatever clothes that they're normally going to wear. Plus on top of that, they're wearing a very thick gown of some type, or they're wearing very thick coveralls of some type. They have a mask, a head covering, shoe covering. So all the places where heat leaves the body is covered for the most part. And so as a result, if they do perspire, you do have increased increased microbial burden that occurs in the room and an increased likelihood of contaminating it. As far as temperature affecting the products in themselves, the higher that temperature goes, and of course, if the humidity goes higher, you promote microbial growth in various spaces within your clean room, but it can also promote microbial growth that may have been introduced into your product. One of the reasons for some of the dating and the reason we have the sterility testing in play is because of the fact that it is possible, very, very possible, not rare, not exceedingly rare, none of those, for a very efficient sterile compounder to inadvertently introduce some type of microbe into one of these products.
They could do that even if the temperature was normal. They could very clearly, but if you're doing a filtration or however you're sterilizing that product, depending on your batch size, you're going to be running a test, and hopefully you're sequestering what you're running. And so then that would prove that your temperatures were fine if they did creep up. Any ethical compounder sees their temperatures are going to creeping up. They're going to stop compounding. They're going to finish what they're doing, and they're going to exit the room until they can get the PEC under control.
What about those that are bending rules or not being ethical, and they follow the rules simply because they have to? We make the rules. I mean, I worry about that.
That's
the ethical ones are always going to do what they
ethical,
should, and
exactly.
best practices. But what about the others?
They're probably not following them to begin with. I agree with you. 2 hours would be the minimum I would ask for.
Well, I think changing it at this point would prevent us from moving forward.
Can we leave it, and then if we find that this is an issue, come back later and amend instead of just trying to do it here? Because we'll be here forever trying to make.
Oh no,
everything
we will tweak
perfect.
forever.
I think if we're looking at it from a practical standpoint, and we're seeing it from, because I think now we're trying to perfect it, right? Trying to make sure that everything's perfect, rather than getting progress. Obviously, we've made tons of progress, right, for this, and I think rather than trying to make sure that it is absolutely perfect, I think we can see by adopting this and seeing going forward how similar to what the Constitution did, right? For those of you who know the history of the Constitution, there's 21 amendments, right? They all weren't from day one, right? So I think if we use that kind of mindset, that we can take this, use it as is, and then as we go, to Jenny's point, all of those things we can begin to adopt and amend later down the road.
Well, and we have to remember that the whole reason why we do the mission statement at the beginning is this isn't the business of pharmacy. This is public health, and we're protecting the citizens of Texas. So putting something in play, you know, based upon time is becoming very prudent. So
We'll come back. Yeah. Okay. There were some other things but they weren't things that we are actually have been changed. Look at line 2118, and it's the 5% on the sterility testing. You know, the labs, when you send things off to be tested, the labs tell you how much to send. I mean, based on all the charts in USP. So they look at your batch size, and it's, you know, if it's less than 50 vials, it's a certain number that you send in. And it might be the 5%, but as you get up, if 100 vials or 500 vials, that number gets lower to like a 2% or 20 vials, whichever is greater. But the lab tells you what to send, or at least my lab does, tells me what to send them when, you know, when I'm sending things in. So I don't know if this is something that we fix later, like you said, Donna, or if there can be some type of understanding with inspectors who are trying to enforce this 5% that, you know, we're sending what the lab tells us to based on the USP charts. Does that make sense?
yeah, I'm not
looking at
sure
Megan.
how to.
So it would be less than 5% that would be sent?
If the batch sizes are bigger, I think there's a 2%, there's a cap, and maybe one of the people on the task force.
It's a variable chart. So it's a variable chart based on your batch size. So the percentage actually decreases as your batch size increases. I think we had talked about this. I can't remember how we ended up at the 5%. It was a very lengthy discussion in one of our board meetings. I'd have to go back and look at. But I believe I don't recall the original language, but I actually want to say it referenced USP, was it 71, I believe, is sterility testing. So I think that it was a reference to that. And then we had discussion that led us to just using a blanket 5%.
So I think that would fall under, or rather that would be a cleanup. Or would that be?
So you're wanting to change it to reference back to the USP chart?
I'm not saying change it. I just want to know that there's an understanding with the inspectors, though.
No, because
It
I mean,
might
the
not
rule
be
is very
5.
clear. Sterility testing shall be performed on a number of units equal to 5%.
That is going to be significant for some things, price-wise. It's more than, depending on what you're making. Whew. So we can't change it to 2. That would be substantive to
Just changing it to a blanket 2% instead of 5%. So that's probably a logical outgrowth, but again, getting more and more substantive.
I will say that range varies significantly from 2% to much more than 5% when we look at it. And so I think that I can't remember the specifics of the meeting. We'd have to go back and look at it, but I think we ended up at 5% for simplicity because I think there was interest in completely removing sterility testing for batches of a smaller size. And so rather than trying to recreate and modify and tweak this USP 71 chart, which is what the labs use, I think the idea was to compromise to a 5%. So I think that was, if I'm recalling correctly, I think that's how we ended up there.
All right, so then we'll stay 5% and we'll clean it up.
Do you have anything else? Okay, I think you need to put your microphone up a little bit closer to you.
I'm sorry, 1722. On H, a pharmacy may not compound a preparation that contains ingredients appearing on the Federal Food and Drug Administration list. I think we ought to add human use and then have a little statement in there on vet compounding. Because just because it's been removed from the market for human use, there's a few instances where we can do vet compounding with it. Like cisapride is one of the actives.
Megan, if changing that now, is that substantial?
That's a
That would
completely
be a
new.
complete new
That's a section
rule.
we haven't
Okay.
even touched.
All right, coming back then. Mm-hmm.
So does FDA govern the drugs used in veterinary medicine?
They do.
Mm-hmm.
Very much so. That was the last of my tweaks.
Okay. I'm fixing everything else. Okay, so I'm going back to our original. We have a motion with Megan's change and the grammatical error or grammatical corrections that Jenny gave. I have a second here from Donnie. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. All right. John, how would you like to take us through the proposed rules?
Yes, thank you, Madam President. Board members, we have one proposed rule at C 2.1. It's a new rule, 291.13, concerning telehealth services provided by a pharmacist. And this new rule, if adopted, establishes the documentation and retention requirements regarding a patient's consent to treatment, data collection, and data sharing for telehealth services provided by a pharmacist. And we're doing this in accordance with House Bill 1700. So when you look at 291.13, let's start with lines 6 through 7. It defines telehealth service as having the meaning defined by Texas Occupations Code 111.0013. So there's your definition. Lines 8 through 9, the requirements of subsection C of this section apply to a telehealth service regardless of whether the patient interaction occurs in a video or audio only format. Lines 10 through 13 provide that a pharmacist who provides a telehealth service shall obtain the informed consent of the patient or of another individual authorized to make healthcare treatment decisions for the patient before the telehealth service is provided. The informed consent may be obtained either in writing or verbally. And looking at lines 14 through 17, the informed consent shall include the patient's consent to treatment, data collection, and data sharing. Lines 18 through 22 provides that the informed consent shall be documented by recording the initials or identification code of the pharmacist who obtained the consent as follows, and that's in the pharmacy's data processing system, in an electronic logbook, or in a hard copy log. Finally, we move down to lines 23 through 30. Documentation of informed consent shall be kept by the pharmacy at the pharmacy's licensed location and be available for at least 2 years from the date of such record for inspection and copying by the board or its representative and to other authorized local, state, or federal law enforcement agencies, and supplied by the pharmacy within 72 hours if requested by an authorized agent of the board. Failure to provide the records either on site or within 72 hours constitutes prima facie evidence of failure to keep and maintain records in violation of the Act.
All right, board members. We're going to need any discussion on this, and then this will be a motion to propose. Again, this follows House Bill 1700.
I have two recommended changes. And kind kind of also looking to Megan and John to see if these are necessary or if they're covered. One is on line 13. Do we need to also include that the informed consent may be obtained electronically, or does in writing cover that?
In writing could be electronic.
Okay, great. Then don't need to worry about that. And then on number 20, the informed consent shall be documented. So on line 20, pharmacies data processing system. So many of these services are provided using electronic health record within a health system. So can we include electronic health record as one of those options?
Wouldn't that be defined in the data processing system? You're storing it electronically in your system, right?
It's usually going to be obtained. It's usually going to be present in progress notes and things like that are outside of the pharmacy module. So like if I look at, and I may be splitting hairs here, which is why I kind of asked, but you'll have, like, for example, if I just use the product Epic as an example, because a lot of people use that health record, you have a pharmacy system and it is called Willow and it is contained within that system, but where you're documenting is outside of that system.
So the issue that we identified with putting electronic health record is that we may not have authority to access or demand records from an electronic health record because it does not belong to the pharmacy. So, if it's a doctor's office or a hospital and it's outside of our jurisdiction, then we would have no way of obtaining those records and confirming that that consent was documented.
And I'm actually thinking about I gotcha. That makes perfect sense. So I'm actually thinking about like a owned electronic health record though. So if I'm in my health system and I'm delivering this service and all my stuff is through the same health record, I have my pharmacy system, which is WHAM, and then I have a separate system where we're actually documenting patient things, but we document other pharmacy things there as well. So it would be accessible
Part
to
of the
board.
pharmacy's system? Would it be part of the pharmacy's system then?
It's not. I don't know. If that would qualify, then that's fine.
I think probably so. My concern with putting it broader than that is that you might have an issue where a pharmacist is really working as a delegate for like a physician or something like that, and
like as a third party.
Yeah, and that's more of TMB's area than it would be ours, and we just don't want to blur those lines.
No, that makes perfect sense. Okay, if y'all feel it's included, that's fine.
Mr. Tisch. Yeah, it would depend. I mean, it could be done through their drug benefits as well. They could be doing medication therapy management, which would then be through the drug side. Possibly. Or
sometimes.
possibly not. It could possibly be just a counseling session that they're documenting.
Like they could be doing it as like if you have a capitated program or something like that, and you're trying to improve quality measures, you're not necessarily going to bill for that because that would exceed your cap anyway, so it doesn't matter. It could also be, related to an MTM service or something like that. So it may be billed, but not necessarily.
Okay.
Let's try that again.
Yes.
C.3. Review and approval of fiscal year 2026 to 2029 rule review plan. Behind C.3 is your rule review plan for fiscal year 2026 through 2029. And state law requires you, board members, to review your rules on a 4-year cycle. And while state law requires you to review the rules on a 4-year cycle, what you're looking to see here is if you need these rules. It is not about the content of them. And the rules that are up for adoption today under C.3.1 are C.3.1.1, Chapter 291 concerning nuclear pharmacies or Class Bs, and C.3.1.2, Chapter 309 concerning substitution of drug. And again, those are up for adoption today.
All right. Again, we're not looking at the substance. We're just looking at whether we need the rules, and we will need a motion to adopt on this should we decide we need them. I think Randy beat you out on that. So Randy made the motion to adopt Donnie Lewis made the second. All those in favor? Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you, John. All right, next on our agenda is D, and it's the reports of committees and task force, and I will turn it over to Danny.
Thank you, Julie. D.1 is the PMP Advisory Committee. That committee did meet on 12/19. We didn't have enough for a quorum, so we'll reschedule that meeting for February the 27th. And for D.2, the PMP Interagency Work Group, we actually did meet with that work group on January 21st. Back in September, there was a recommendation from the advisory committee to adjust the display on the PMP to move the raw data up above the graphics. And so we wanted to make sure that we engaged the other boards or the agencies that are involved with the PMP. So the Board of Nursing, the Medical Board, Dental, Optometry, and Podiatry, they were all there. They had no opposition to that change. The change has been requested, and you should notice it next Monday. It'll go into effect. It won't be, I don't think it'll be, people, you'll notice it, but it won't be really a big difference for what you're seeing. So you'll see the raw data up.
I am going to present to you the agency financial update. The report reflects cumulative expense activity from September 1st of 2025 through November 30th of 2025. If you'll look at E.1.1, you'll find the budget status report covering the cumulative first quarter expense activities. The next item is E.1.2, which shows the first quarter travel expenditures through the end of quarter one. And then lastly, under E.1.3, there is not an attachment as there were no items for consideration of material changes to contracts for goods and services. And I am available if you have any questions about any of those exhibits.
Any questions for Ann? All right. Well, thank you, Ann, and thank you for stepping in for Ruben. We're going to skip over E.2, and we will drop down to E.3 for the review and approval of the 2027 to 2031 strategic plan. And I'll turn it over to Danny.
Thank you, Julie. If you click on E.3, you'll see the timeline for the strategic plan and the LAR request. September, we sent out a questionnaire to the interested parties for comments to be used on this assessment. That questionnaire went out. It came back. We talked about it in November, and now we're in February, where we're here to review and approve these strategic plan issue statements. So scroll down, and you'll see those issue statements below. That came from that survey back in September. So we're hard to believe we're halfway through FY26 already. So, and then you'll see the timeline moving forward for that. So if you have any questions about that, we'll be happy to talk about it.
All right. And we do need a motion to approve on this. I heard it. So Rick made the motion. Rick Tisch has made a motion to approve. Ian has seconded. All those in favor of approving the strategic plan issue statements? Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, Danny, if you want to take us through the annual report.
Yes, ma'am. So on E.4, if you click, you'll see the a detailed report of what we've done at the board this past year, or sorry, FY25. If you really want to know the scope and the depth of what goes on here from day to day, take a look at that. It's 118 pages. It gives you a good idea of what we do. A lot of good work. I just want to shout out, I want to say thank you to the staff who actually did all the work, and to the directors who put all of these numbers and all the data together, and especially for Ann, who put it in this format. It's a good format. I know it's long, but it's really, really good. So we're happy to Ann's here still. If you have any questions about any of this, we're happy to answer any questions. And that's it. That's the report.
All right. Again, we need a motion to approve the annual report. We have one from Randy, a second. Second from Donnie. All those in favor of approving the annual report? Any opposed? All right. Motion carries. All right, moving on to E.5. Mr. Merriman has a report on the prescription monitoring program for us.
Good morning, Madam President and members of the board. Recently, the PMP team began the process of converting to a new administrative license verification tool. Once completed, this tool will simply assist PMP staff in our efforts to monitor and ensure that PMP users maintain the necessary credentials to access the system. Next, I would like to highlight some of the PMP statistics compiled from PMP data reported during the first quarter of fiscal year 2026. These stats are summarized on the first page found behind tab E.5 on the agenda. There were a total of 3,432 new registered healthcare users that were granted PMP accounts during this period. By quarter's end, there were a total of 209,972 registered healthcare PMP users, which represents 75.4% of the total number of Texas licensed healthcare professionals that are eligible to have a PMP account. The percentage of eligible pharmacists that are registered with a PMP account decreased 1.3% to 86.3%. The percentage of eligible physicians that are registered with a PMP account increased 1.5% to 91.2%. Regarding searches, PMP searches, there were a total of 83.9 million searches during this quarter. Of that number, 43.1% of all searches were conducted by pharmacists, while physicians conducted 42.7% of the total searches. Additionally, out of the total 83.9 million searches conducted, 68.1 million, or 81.1%, were integrated electronic health record searches rather than manual PMP searches. And finally, the graphic at the bottom right of the stat sheet illustrates the states or entities that Texas shares PMP data with as of quarter's end. I would like to highlight that in September of 2025, Texas reached a data sharing agreement with the state of Utah, which brings the total number of PMP data sharing partners to 41.
All right. Thank you, David. Any questions for David regarding PMP? All right. As always, David, thank you so much for the report and the hard work that you and your team do. With that, we're going to turn it over to Megan for E.6 to give us an update on the appeals from the State Office of Administrative Hearings.
Thank you. So we still have the one matter that you've heard about for quite a few board meetings now. That's the Amayosi matter. The petitioner, who is a pharmacist, has an agreed board order that was entered back in February of 2017, and we received an order of non-disclosure relating to the underlying conduct. The petitioner filed a motion for enforcement of the order of non-disclosure by contempt with the 179th District Court in Harris County, and an attorney from the Attorney General's office is handling that case for us. The most recent update is that the Attorney General's motion to transfer the venue to Travis County was granted on January 8th. And so we're now waiting for the Travis County Court to let us know where we'll move on from there.
All right. Thank you, Megan. With that, we'll go to E.7, and I'll turn it over to Sean to give us a legislative update.
Thank you. Hello. Attached in E.7 is a chart of legislation that affects the agency and or the practice of pharmacy. Please note that this chart was presented during the November board meeting, and as such, I will only be going over new information. Beginning with HB 25, the bill passed in the 89th second special session and allows pharmacists to dispense ivermectin without a prescription. The bill does not require the board to create rules in order to go into effect on December 4th, 2025. Moving to HB 1700, the bill establishes that each regulatory authority must create rules that standardize how health professionals document and retain patient consent related to various key aspects, namely treatment, data collection, and data sharing. Related rules were proposed earlier in the board meeting. Next, SB 912 introduces a continuing education tracking system for healthcare practitioners in Texas, requiring licensing entities to verify continuing education compliance for license renewals. Related rules were adopted earlier in the board meeting. That brings me to the end of the chart, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right. Do we have any questions for Sean? All right. Thank you. All right. So E.8, it has been a topic of discussion at a couple of district meetings, and the topic has been brought up to the board for us to consider allowing applicants to take their jurisprudence at a time other than post-graduation. And so what the universities are kind of asking is that could students after their third year, before they start their internships, go ahead and take their MPGAE to get it out of the way, decrease the stress level upon graduation for the NAPLEX. There was a pretty robust discussion at the district meeting, and a request was made for us to bring this forward to discuss it. Now, there are some things we need to kind of keep in mind with this. One is the fact that should we want to go forward with it, we will have to have some rulemaking. So we would have to get with staff on that. The other thing that would have to be kept in mind is really how licensing, is going to keep track of one test and the other. So Misty's here if we have any questions. And then the other thing is that students are going to have to keep track of this. It's only good, a test result is only good for 2 years. So if they take it at the end of their third year, and then they take their NAPLEX at the end of their fourth, should they have difficulties with their NAPLEX? The time's ticking on their MPJE. They could run into a situation where they would have to retake their MPJE. So that would be up to the student to follow through with. But I'm bringing it forward for a pointed discussion to see board's thoughts on it and any possible action we may want to take. So I will open it up to the group.
So I would assume if they take it at the end of their third year and they don't pass, then we would have to write some kind of rule of now you have to wait till maybe your fourth year or.
Sorry, Donna. It's a one-time thing.
It's a
So
one-time.
NABP has piloted this in a couple of states, and it's a one-time deal. And so if they don't pass it, they wait till
it's time to
the
take the
graduation.
NAPLEX.
Right, correct.
Would this also apply to out-of-state applicants, or would that be totally separate?
No, just in-state.
Well, and the universities, just like they do with the NAPLEX, I mean, they would have to communicate to NABP the fact that these students are eligible. It actually puts more work on them. They're the ones requesting it, but it puts more work on them. So they would have to confer their ability to take the MPJE. Upon graduation, they would have to confer the degree and, send that to NABP for their eligibility to sit for their full boards.
So that's what happened. That's the communication is between the schools and NABP. Well, they send a list of candidates, and then they kind of do the verification. The student needs to, I talked to Misty this morning, the student needs to apply with us earlier than usual, and then they'll have to make sure that they give that authorization to test, approval to test, and that's a whole nother process. So we're going to have to internally, we don't want to overpromise anything. We're going to have to figure out what that looks like and what the timeline is going to look like too. So it's going to be 2 separate verifications.
I will say it does solve some workforce challenges that I know are experienced with residency programs, because a lot of times, there's, we recently actually talked about rules on this where there's a time window whenever between the time that a pharmacist can get licensed after entering into a residency program. And so having the law exam able to be taken earlier, and you kind of alleviate some of that exam bottleneck, scheduling bottleneck,
Mm-hmm.
could relieve, make things a little more streamlined. I don't know. Kind of curious. Does staff? Do y'all have a recommendation on this?
I mean, I don't know. It for us. I mean, we have to do what's best. You know what the board decides. If I were coming out of pharmacy school right now, I would opt in for it. I mean, I think I would take it while it's fresh. I would do it probably after the 3rd year, like Julie said, to give me a little bit of time afterward, just in case I'm not as prepared as I thought I was, and I can take that Naplex a couple of times if I needed to. But I wouldn't take it any earlier than after the 3rd year, just because of that window is shrinking.
Well, and I think you brought up a really good point. We see it all the time where students are, we've hired them, and it's like, well, I can't get a seat at a testing facility until this date. And I'm always like, drive down to Corpus, drive anywhere, but it's very difficult. So it would spread it out so it's not so intense. Donna, you were having
my question was to Misty. How would this impact your current system? And it's always about our staff too. What would that do to your workflow?
And Misty, I'm going to ask you to come to a microphone. I'm sorry. I could see you not wanting to do that, but I was going to make you.
It's a good question.
That is a good question. It is the team having to look at one person twice. So we will have to have their application 8 weeks for us to review it, approve them to set. If everything goes right and they pass, then we have to wait for graduation. The college would send us the list of their graduation affidavit and their hours. Then we would send that to NABP. So we are having to touch it twice. Same with NABP. They're going to have to do the same. My understanding is NABP then needs their transcripts when they graduate. So they're reviewing that as well. So it is a time crunch. And if the applicant themselves, let's say their 4th year, they want to take it, but they haven't applied with us and they're trying to rush, it's still an 8 week for us to review it. So they'll have to pay the application, submit their supplemental documents. The only thing that we won't need to have is their graduation affidavit and their hours to take it early. So we get to approve them to sit. That's not the problem. It's just the time frame of looking at them twice and knowing that we need to go back and look at them again. So if we send them a deficiency and they haven't gotten back with us, their application's just going to sit there. So it's really back on the applicant.
Oh, I think did you have something?
I was just going to say, I think yes, it will be probably a pain for us here and for any NABP, but I think it gives the student the opportunity, and it's on them, right? Mm-hmm. So we're just giving them a bigger opportunity to be able to be prepared, get their things done. If they forget the deadline, if they don't, that's on them. But we gave them the opportunity and made it easier and more streamlined for them. So I don't see that there's a downside necessarily, except of course for us internally, but I think it's a good thing for the students.
So is that something we would charge an extra fee for since it is more work?
No. We just, sorry, Misty, we just have to figure out the workflow. You know what I mean? And that's what I mean when we don't want to overpromise, because it's going to take a little bit of time and maybe at first trying to figure out the process and what it looks like.
So is there already an application fee for that?
The application fee is just for licensure. So the $103 is for them to apply as a pharmacist. So it covers the MPJE and the NAPLEX with us. If they fail, then they pay again. So that $103, but again, like Danny said, they're not going to be able to retake it until after they graduate if they fail it.
So all of that, like the fees and the application part, that stuff is done. So that's not the second part she has to touch, but she has to go in and do the whole authority to, the approval to test and all of that sort of thing on the second part of this. It just opens that window up. Yeah.
Were you thinking that there should be a fee if you want to take it early?
No, not necessarily. I was just
Okay.
curious.
So what is the pleasure of the board? Do you want more information on it? Do you want staff to bring back what the change in rules would need to look like?
Do we have to have a motion, or what do we need for this?
We just need direction.
Yeah, just need direction.
I would like for the staff to tell us what it would look like and what the role would look like so that we could then consider it.
All right. So we'll bring it back for further discussion on what the rules look like then.
Thanks, Misty.
Thank you, Misty. And really, thank you to all of licensing. They do a tremendous amount of work. And as a board, we're very grateful for everything you and your staff do. With that, that's going to take us to E.9. And Megan, I believe that you have a petition you want to walk us through.
Yes. This is a petition from Jeannie Lee, an individual who currently resides in South Korea. She is requesting that the board adopt a 6-year cap from graduation for pharmacist licensure completion and an inactive status option for licensed pharmacists medically unable to practice. I strongly encourage you to deny this petition. Pharmacists currently have the option to go on inactive status without disclosing medical information to the board. And the 6-year cap that is suggested would mean any pharmacist who graduated more than 6 years prior would no longer have the option of being licensed by examination in Texas. They would have to seek licensure in another state and then apply by reciprocity in order to be licensed in this state. The suggested cap could even negatively affect Ms. Lee. If she did not return to the United States within the proposed 6-year cap from her graduation, she would not have the option of applying for Texas licensure by examination. So our licensing team has had numerous conversations with Ms. Lee. Her MPJE score has expired, and it has been explained to her that she would need to return to the United States to take her tests. There is currently no deadline by which she would need to return in order to be able to test. She would just need to pass both of those exams within the 2-year period.
Questions for Megan? Do we have a motion?
Motion to deny.
We have a motion to deny from Haysha. We have a second from Ian. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, that is going to take us to F. Ms. Caroline, would you take us through enforcement?
Yes. So F.1 is the report on complaints that were closed or dismissed in the first quarter of FY26. And you can see at the top of the chart the complaints that were closed without disciplinary action and the method of closure. And then the second part of the chart is complaints that were closed with disciplinary action, then followed by complaints that were closed with no action and referrals to other agencies. And the chart, starts over. So this is the first quarter of 26. But on the second page, you can see a comparison of the first quarter closures with the quarterly average from last fiscal year. And then you can move on to your open complaints. So that's F.2. So this is the complaints that are open. And the top chart is the historical information on the number of complaints that were received, the complaints that were closed, and then the average resolution time. And the second chart, if you look at the column on the far right, this is the number of open complaints as of January 15th, 2025, with their aging category.
Are there any questions for Caroline? All right. Thank you, Ms. Caroline. All right, with that, we will go to G and our disciplinary orders, and I'll turn it over to Megan.
All right, you have received the information associated with the items under G and the information has also been put on your laptops, and these are all of the agreed board orders, default orders, and remedial plans that have either been entered or are being proposed to you. Under G.1 is a report on all of the orders that have been entered by Danny. These are the ones that you have authorized him to enter. This item does not need a vote and is just for your information. So if you don't have any questions on those, we'll move on to the next part. G.2 are the proposed agreed board orders and default orders, and G.3 are the proposed remedial plans. These include both orders and remedial plans resulting from informal conferences and those proposed by mail per your previous instructions to staff. You'll notice for the orders resulting from an informal conference, on those, the chart indicates the board members that were at that informal conference. If you participated in the informal conference, we would automatically recuse you from that vote. So unless you have any questions on these, we would need a motion to approve the proposed agreed board orders and default orders and the proposed remedial plans. So that's both items G.2 and G.3.
Ian, is that a motion to approve? I have a motion to approve from Ian, a second from Donna. All those in favor? All right. So, board members, that leaves on our agenda, other than our miscellaneous, one item, and that is our PRN program. They are scheduled to be here at 1:30. It is now 11:20, 11:19. So we will go ahead and adjourn for lunch, and we will come back at 1:30 for that item, and we'll adjourn till then. Thank you in the audience.